Yeah, I hear you about Gnosticism, but agnosticism. That was the question.
Yeah.
I get it. Gnosticism and all that, but
It's just not
agnosticism.
agnosticism.
What are we dealing with? Agnosticism, Gnosticisms, Gnostici.
The plural form.
Gnosticesis. The church was struggling with a rare case of Gnosticesis. All right, let's go.
Travis, how are you doing this morning? Last week wasn't pretty.
Yep. I feel ready to go. I don't even need a jingle. Last week, I preached on a Sunday morning, then drove to San Francisco because we got to install Tim and Kelsey Harms as the leaders of Sanctuary Church up there. And then I drove home, and then we were together early. I think I got home from San Francisco at like midnight, and then you and I were here at 7 a.m. So I just was regretting that it was a next day Q&A, but...
Did the jingle help last time?
No. You know what else didn't help? I think that I had COVID, or a little bit of COVID left in me.
Yeah.
So I spent the week in quarantine too. So I don't know that I was in a great place on that Monday morning.
Yeah.
So I feel better.
Let's cut this banter. Let's cut it short. No more of this banter. Hey, I could start with a comment on the sermon. I thought, the part about joy at the end was, I think, my favorite part. And even as I was rereading the passage yesterday, these first 4 verses of 1 John, what came to me is that part about joy is actually kind of a surprising ending to those first few verses. Mm-hmm. Because he's talking about, he knows the apostolic witness, the way you're saying it yesterday. He's heard, seen, and touched. This testimony is sure. And he says, we have fellowship with God, we have fellowship with one another. And then I would think the conclusion to that would be, and so this is how you can be rock solid in your faith.
Yeah, right.
This is how you can be unshakable in doctrine, because I've seen and touched him, and we have fellowship with God.
Yeah, this is how you can be right.
Yeah.
Eternally right.
Yeah. But instead, he takes a left turn and says, and this is so you can have joy.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really just shocking and kind of delightful all at the same time, that this is actually the pathway to joy. Like the sureness of what John experienced and the sureness of our fellowship with God and each other. Like that's the way to joy.
Isn't that what you long for, though, as a teacher? You long for people to know that theology isn't cold,
mm-hmm.
but it produces a sort of relational warmth and fire, inside.
Yeah.
Don't you deal with that? People thinking oh, theology, and it's cold, it's calculated, it's just intellectual assent to some, concept.
Yeah. I have thought that myself at times. And it's just, I love that it's just not the way John sees it. He sees it as, the pathway to delight. So, but it also, it's relational knowledge too. I think that's part of what John is getting at. It's not just reading a bunch of theology books, because that's not the same equation.
Right.
That's not the pathway to joy.
Right.
It's
a knowing.
Yeah. It's knowledge. It's the knowledge of God, in communication with God.
Yeah.
The relational knowledge. So
that leads to that first Can you answer that question? I mean, that leads into one of the questions we got.
Which one?
Well, about how can we experience this type of fellowship, or what you're going to tackle too. I'm going to tackle too.
Yeah. Okay. I'll read the question. Are we saying who they're from?
I don't know if we're,
it's anonymous. Okay. The first anonymous question.
My mom asked the question,
Yeah.
Are you losing weight?
Okay, the first, here we go. So, Mr. So-and-so asked, how do we have fellowship today with the apostles' testimony of what they saw, heard, and touched? Obviously, we can read their testimony in the Bible, but are there ways to experience this fellowship more deeply than mental understanding? Yeah, so it's actually just what we were talking about. So my answer, I think the answer is simple, and I think the answer has to be simple. If we start making up these elaborate, ethereal, almost secretive ways of experiencing God that are similar to the way the Apostle John did, I think we ourselves are becoming Gnostic. That's like what Gnosticism is. And so our fellowship with God, the pathway is really simple. It starts with knowing the truth about who Jesus is. That's where John started. And then it continues with things like studying and meditating on the Bible, like was mentioned in the question, prayer, worship, fellowship with other people that love Jesus. I mean, the spiritual disciplines,
right?
Fasting. These are all ways that we connect with God in an intimate way. And it's not secret. It's not hard. They're all throughout the Bible.
I find that most of those things are like, the difficulty lies in the application. Like they're real simple in theory and then really difficult in application.
Yeah.
Like you're like, it's simple fasting. And it's like, what? Like,
yeah,
it's so hard to fast and not spend your whole day thinking about food, and how dependent you are on food. And the idea would be that we're fasting and we're thinking like, God, we're dependent on you. We rely on you. We count on you.
But simple is different than difficult. Simple is better said. Simple is different than easy. And that's what you're saying. And I think
totally.
It's really helpful what you're saying, because when I say simple, I don't mean easy. I think, an hour of prayer can be really difficult, to focus, to lock in for an hour. So yes, it's not easy a lot of times, but it is simple. It's not a secret.
Yeah, I think, that brings me back to a question that came in last week. And I don't have it in front of me, but the question was, I wanted to circle back to it because it was basically like, isn't our charismatic tradition prone to Gnosticism?
Okay.
Like they were asking, like, isn't it prone to special revelation? Since we believe in the revelatory gifts that they're for today, that people can see visions, that they can hear God's voice, that isn't it prone to a sort of, this revelation is unique to me kind of, and I was thinking, yeah, it totally is. Like, I think that the charismatic tradition is prone to a, special knowledge, or I went to the third heavens and got something.
The God told me card.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I, as I thought about it, I thought, well, that person's right. Like that is kind of one of the temptations of our stream, is that type of behavior. But then I thought, you know what? Every stream has a form of this, not just the charismatic stream, because ultimately in the Gnosticism is like an elitism. Like this is a special knowledge. Like you'd have to pass many levels to get to this place, And so, yes, as charismatics, we value the gifts. And so those that possess those gifts, we think are in a special place or have a special knowledge. But I was thinking, in the contemplative tradition of the church, it's like, well, those people who spend days in silence and solitude, sure, they're the elite. They're a step above the rest, Or like in a holiness tradition of the church stream, it's like, well, they don't watch rated R movies and they don't drink, and they're really set apart. Some people are set apart, but then some people are really set apart, You
could say in the evangelical stream or even the Presbyterian stream, it's Bible knowledge.
Oh, totally. It's like, because you value the teaching of the word and intellect. So those guys are a cut above the rest, you know? I think that's totally present. Or even what about the social justice tradition? You know, like, look, their life is full of activism, you know, and look how poor they are. And they strip themselves of all comfort in order to see change produced, you know, and they really have it, you know? And so, or the missions people, it's like, you know, how long did you live in the 1040 window? And it's like, well, that guy like gave his life, you know, to the Middle East. And so I do think that the issue under like Gnosticism is our desire to feel superior to others and have a righteousness of our own, like a self-righteousness of our own, meaning like we have to feel better than someone somehow. And that to me is at the root of like, you know, I'm going to climb the ladder and I'm going to get to God, you know, elitism.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a second part to this question, but I'm not sure if we want to go there. The second part of the question was, what role do apostles play today in bringing us into fellowship with Christ? And I actually reached out to the person because I asked him, do you mean the first century apostles? What role did they play? Or do you mean modern day apostles? And he said modern day apostles. So that's a bit of a can of worms.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think to answer that in a brief way, we believe in post-ascension apostles, but they are lowercase a.
Right.
So we have Christ, who is the apostle, the sent one. We have the apostles of the Lamb, which are fixed and have thrones and can write scripture and all of it.
Right.
But then the Bible itself names apostles beyond the 12.
Barnabas.
Right. Which is kind of, and some would even argue Paul.
Yeah.
Talk about a can of worms. So yes, I guess the thing I like to say is like, we believe in the apostolic gift, because I think saying apostles or, you know, because the whole point of giving someone a title is so that they'll function, I guess, in that gift. And so why can't we say people have a prophetic gift without saying you're a prophet?
Yeah.
Or why can't we say what a cool apostolic gift to father leaders and motivate mission and plant churches and reach new people? Like, why do we have to call people apostles? It's really creepy when someone hands you their business card and it says, you know, apostle so-and-so.
It's unnecessary.
It is. But at the same time, the answer to that abuse is not like, well, then we're not going to do it at all. But like, the Bible itself names post-ascension apostles.
Yeah.
And what do we do with that? I don't know. That's probably as far as we can go into that.
That's great. Well, and just to say, because the question was, what role do they play in bringing us into fellowship with Christ? And I would just say, not really anything different than what all spiritual leaders play, you know?
Yeah.
They pastor us, they disciple us, they teach us, but they're not in between us and Jesus. We have a direct pathway to Jesus now because of the cross.
It's good.
Okay, why don't you do one of your questions?
Oh man. Okay. This one is, how did Gnostics view Christ's resurrection and ours in the future with their denigration of physical bodies? Have I acted like a know-it-all in this area of Gnosticism? Do you feel like I'm a little worried that with all the questions about Gnosticism that I'm acting like an expert. I'm not.
It was I think the first 10 minutes were on Gnosticism. You laid it out. And I thought it was helpful. I thought it was pretty meaty and helpful.
Was I pretending to know more than I did though?
It sounded, yours sounded pretty Gnostic in a little bit.
I know something you guys don't know about knowing something. Okay, so the idea behind Gnosticism, the big idea, the body's bad. That's what he means by the denigration of physical bodies, and matter doesn't matter. So the material inferior, spiritual was superior. So here's someone who is an expert, N.T. Wright. He says early Christians were all Jews, and Jews had a thoroughly different worldview than the Greeks or the Gnostics. They believed firmly that this material world was made good. And despite sin, God was going to renew it and resurrect our bodies. Jews had no hope or concept of disembodied souls living apart from the body. So we believe as Christians, like what happened to Jesus is going to happen to us, that he's the first fruits from among the dead. Jesus said he would raise his own body in John 2. He says, destroy this temple, in 3 days I will raise it. And the Jews then said, it took us 46 years to build this temple, bruh, and you're going to raise it up in 3 days. But Jesus was speaking about the temple of his body. And when he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this, and they believed the scripture, what Jesus had spoken. So he retained the scars after his resurrection. It was the same body. And what's interesting, this is fascinating.
Physical body, right?
Well,
his resurrected body.
I mean,
is that how you say it? Physical?
Well, there is, it is like he does like go through walls.
Yeah.
You know, so that, so to say the same physical body, well, yeah.
It's not natural flesh, but there's something physical and material about it.
Yeah. I mean, he said, touch here, my scars, my side. Like there was something recognizable about it.
Sorry, you're about to say something amazing.
Well, okay. So yeah. So the Gospel of Thomas, some of the trouble with the Gospel of Thomas, which I think you'll remember from that hit kind of book made movie with Tom Hanks, The Da Vinci Code, I think made much of the Gospel of Thomas. So it was rejected as being a part of the Bible because it presents a Gnostic Jesus. And in Thomas, this Gnostic Jesus says, I will destroy this house and no one will be able to rebuild it. That's what Jesus says about his body. And this is a clear contradiction to what Jesus says in John 2, that others would destroy his body and he would be resurrected. And this represents this Gnostic, you know, what he says, like disdain for the idea of resurrection. So
interesting. Okay.
Their view was the material world is an evil thing and we must be freed from it. And the bodily resurrection is completely rejected, according to Gnostics. Almost like Jesus was not raised bodily and we won't be either. Jesus was raised in the spirit, not in the body. His body died and rotted in the grave, but his spirit lived on and ascended to heaven. And this became prominent, not among just Gnostics, but Gnostic Christians. So the body, you needed to be liberated from it and you needed to float off, not that you're raised to new life through resurrection. And they found that appealing. I find that horrifying. Like the less concrete heaven becomes, the less I want to go there. I hate the idea of being disembodied.
Yeah.
I hate the idea of losing all that I've known. And like, I really love the new heavens and the new earth, even to describe heaven. The idea of making all things new. Like, I don't want to float off into the sky. I don't want to be on a cloud. I mean, that's better than hell, you know, but that's not desirable to me.
Yeah. I
want to feast. I want to connect with people. I want to work. I want this whole world as God made it to be. I see little glimpses of it, and that's what I long for.
Yeah, it's a huge paradigm shift when you realize that the Bible teaches that we don't go away to heaven in the end. Heaven comes to earth.
Right.
That is the end goal, that it's a merging. The two become one. Heaven and earth come together and we eat, drink, fellowship on a renewed earth where everything is made beautiful. It's such a hopeful and happy view of the future. And it just, I mean, before I knew that, I wasn't half as excited about the future.
Right? Yeah. The one, it feels sad to me that we're not, I mean, Jesus says we're not given to marriage, and that feels sad to me.
Yeah. That's one part
because that is like, I would want to experience that made whole and renewed as well without my brokenness, you know?
Yeah.
Also, I've just thought, if we're not given to marriage, like, do we not get to have sex in heaven? And I just thought that's terrible, that we have perfect bodies. Like, our bodies have been made new, whole. Yeah. And we don't get to have sex. That was depressing.
One of the questions that came in last night at 3 a.m. was, is there sex in heaven? I'm just joking. Just joking.
Oh, dude. I'm not just prophetic. I'm a prophet.
Somebody was texting at 3 a.m.
Well, anyway.
That's good. That's a good overview of Gnosticism. We don't think you're a Gnostic expert.
Thank you.
That's super helpful.
That's all from NT Wright, and we'll link to that in the show notes.
Cool.
We're an official podcast.
Man, we said when you say
show notes, we'll link to that. I don't even know what that means. I just wanted to say it.
Forrest will figure it out.
We'll put a link to that in the show notes.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay. Next question.
You go.
Okay. Are you sure? Because there might only be time for one more.
Yeah, we're rotating so we don't bog down.
Okay. So another question is interesting. I wouldn't have thought of this from the sermon. Explain what the conditions of fellowship are. What attitudes and behaviors need to change or be present in the life of the believer to have fellowship with God. Uh-huh. Okay, I think the New Testament speaks into this very clearly. And I would say, first of all, that God always initiates relationship with us. And that's true whether you're a Calvinist or an Arminian. It's always God first. We love because God first loved us. So we need to get that straight. But secondly, the question was, what needs to be present in order to have fellowship with God? And really, Paul in his letters makes it really clear that the only response that we make to God's grace and his initiating love for us is faith.
Yeah.
It's trust. It's trust in him. And I wouldn't even necessarily call that an attitude or a behavior. Like we say yes to a free gift that's given to us through what Jesus did on the cross. We receive his righteousness.
Yeah.
So that's it. And Paul's really jealous for that. But the New Testament goes on to add, once we have this fellowship, then we will be transformed and our attitudes and our behavior will change. But that comes afterwards.
Right.
It's really important to know that we don't have to change ourselves before we come to God.
Yeah. I think that question caused me to realize something about myself, which is how quickly we move from what God has done to what we need to do. Like, it is so quick for us to be like, okay, what's the application? What do I need to do?
Yeah.
Wait, what are the boundaries? What am I in charge of? If God's done this, then what do I need to do? And I think that I totally agree with you. Like, what do? We believe in the one who was sent,
Yeah.
But belief is way more than like just this mental assent to a set of ideas. It's like trusting Jesus with your whole life, like put your whole weight on him. But it's so interesting, like, because John does go on to talk about how we stay in step or how we live a life worthy or all the sin and commands. But like, we jump straight to that. Like, okay, what do I need to do? And it's like, hold on, let's just savor what God has done and just continue to meditate on that and have our lives transformed. And I'm not trying to say that's not a good question. It is, but I just noticed when I read it, like, that's where I want to go, is right to like, what are the conditions? What are the terms? Almost like this is too good to be true. What are the terms? This is too good. It can't just be all God, like, well, show me the fine print, because I don't want to get duped here.
Yeah. Here's something interesting is that a lot of people call the epistle of First John a sequel to the Gospel of John. And what's interesting is that the Gospel of John emphasizes simple faith in Jesus. That's a huge emphasis of the gospel. All of these signs that point to simple faith in Jesus. First John is the sequel in that now that we have simple faith in Jesus and have fellowship with him, how do we know for sure that we really have that fellowship? And that's the question that First John asks.
Come on, can I get one more in?
Do it.
Okay. John was apparently writing to counter Gnosticism. But today it seems like agnosticism is more common. What might John have to say to someone who believes it's impossible to know for sure whether God exists? Would his message change at all? I would say no, the message wouldn't change at all. So technically an atheist, that's someone who doesn't believe in God. An agnostic is someone who doesn't believe it's possible to know for sure that God exists. So,
okay.
And basically the person saying that seems to be the issue today, is that people are like, hey, how do we know that we can know? And you can't know anything for sure. And maybe God exists, but we don't know. And I would say you're right. Agnosticism is a problem. I don't know if it's the problem, but it is certainly a problem because suspicion is cool. Like, being cynical is trendy right now. So it's basically like, hey, the only thing you can know is nothing can be known for sure. Like, how can anyone know anything, And John has a lot to say to that, because it's written so that people will have assurance, a confidence of eternal life. So I just notice in my own life that cynicism is convenient because it allows me to sit back and not get too involved in anything. I think that cynicism in my own life is really cowardly. It's really what we're seeing is a lot of once passionate people who have been disappointed, sitting back and not necessarily lunging or moving forward at anything. So,
sure.
Yeah, yes, basically he will have something to say to that, because I think he is trying to produce confidence in the church, and a church that says, we know this and we know him and we know the truth and we can walk forward with a confidence, which we'll get to address in the weeks to come. So
that's great.
How many questions do you think we got to?
We did like some bonus ones. It was like 5 or 6.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much. We hope that you continue to have amazing conversations about what we're receiving in First John.
Keep sending the questions in. We love them.
Your outro jingle. Oh, it's a next day Q&A. It's a next day Q&A.